Hi, I am Pastor Dee Dee. I'm an associate right here at Lovers Lane United Methodist Church. I'm excited today. One of my colleagues is helping me co-host today. Joy, welcome.
Thank you for having me. I'm so excited to be here. I'm one of the associate ministers here at Lovers Lane, and we have the privilege of working together week in and week out. And so to do this is just a fun experience.
I'm excited too, Joy, for who our guest is today, because he also at one time worked here at Lovers Lane.
That's right.
Reverend Dr. Owen Ross, tell us a little bit of what the journey has been like for you since Lovers Lane.
Well, I was here at Lovers Lane from 1998 to 2002.
Wow.
And it was a blessed season. It was very formative in my ministry. Preached my very first sermon here. And then in 2002, Lovers Lane sent me out to plant a Spanish language church just north of Lovers Lane.
Okay.
And so I served Christ Foundry, or La Fundición de Cristo, for 15 years.
Wow.
And Lovers Lane was the strongest supporting church that we could have, and just supported me with prayers, presence, gifts, service, and witness, and really blessed me. And I was there for 15 years. But now I have been working in the conference office, which, with the United Methodist Church, the conference is like our diocese, our judicatory.
There you go.
I tell people I'm now a bureaucrat for Jesus. And so I do church development, leadership, and now our new conference is the Horizon Texas Conference.
So
and
excited.
I am what they're calling the director for the Center for Multiplication, which means we are working to multiply Jesus followers, multiply our congregations, multiply our clergy, multiply our lay leadership. And so starting in October, we will become a new conference, the Horizon Texas Conference, and I'll be leading multiplication in that conference.
Wow. So that's been a journey of particularly what the United Methodist Church has been through recently. How have you found hope in what that is, and where we've come from to where we are now and to where we're going?
Yeah, this past season that we're coming out of, we joke that I'm the director for the Center of Multiplication, because after all the division we've had, it's time to multiply. And the division has been a very painful experience. But when I look at who we are now as a church, the decisions that we have made now as a church, as compared to, in contrast to those who have left us, the United Methodist Church has now made the decision that we are going to be a wide umbrella denomination. That we're going to have people in our denomination that do not think alike on everything. We definitely aren't going to have people who don't vote alike on things, but we're going to have a denomination that's going to love alike. And where I find hope is I just look at our ever divisive and polarizing society, and I see who we have decided to be as a denomination, as a church. And I say, I want to be a part of the healing and not a part of the dividing. I want to be a part of the work that God is going to be doing to bring people together, to build relationships, and to work for the healing of our nation and not for the dividing of our country. I think about how we Methodists first got started in England.
Yeah.
England's neighbors were so divisive. They had guillotines. I mean, they were really a violent butchering. And John Wesley and the earliest Methodists were bringing people together in small groups that they called classes and bands, and then larger groups called societies. And Wesley's harshest criticism were for those who wanted to separate themselves from others. And it's through that bringing together that God transforms us. And that's the work I want to be a part of. And this church, this denomination has made the decision of that's what we want to be about. And that gives me hope.
Yeah. When you say that, I think of in John Wesley's England, really there's history that records that society got better as the movement of Methodism grew. Yeah. And what a vision for what we can be as a church today, that the world around us can literally be shaped and be better because we're here.
Indeed.
So that brings me a lot of hope.
Amen.
Well, and I love that, Joy, thinking about that thought, because so many times we hear the term, this is the worst it's ever been. And I sit there and I go, oh, I don't
Yeah.
think so. You know, because my mother, who was almost 50 when I was born, she was born in 1927. She would look at me and go, oh no, it's gotten better.
Yeah.
And how have you seen it get better?
Well, that's a great question. I do think in my lifetime, it does seem like when I look at society, it's hard for me to say that things are better for everyone. I think in general we can say, yeah, there are these aspects of our society that are better, but there's also certain aspects of our society that are not.
Sure.
And so there's still a lot of work for the church to do. But coming back, I really find hope that our denomination has gotten very clear about who we are and what we're about.
Yeah.
And that we are getting in the business of healing a divided land, a divided country, a divisive world. And that we're in a world where wars are raging, that we are going to preach the peace that surpasses understanding.
Absolutely.
And we're saying, let it begin with us.
Yeah. Well, and I love the fact that when we wanted change, the Methodist Church was a part of change. Yeah. You can go through history and see every time women's rights, hospitals, colleges, you look and you're like, when we needed things to happen, the Methodist Church stepped up to do that.
Indeed.
And I think what I'm proud of is that that's what we're seeing again. Is a Methodist Church is saying we're stepping up again and making that change happen. And I think your role gets to see that in such a special way, Owen, and in such at my house we would call it in a really cool way. That some of us don't always, because we live in it and we're kind of, Joy and I, we're lucky enough that we get to see this diversity, but not everybody gets to see that. Like, Joy, I was thinking about that earlier. I'm like, you and I really get to see the coolness of diversity in our services, and not everybody does get to see that, but I see God moving in really amazing ways. And I'm excited. Yes. And I'm so excited for what God has in the future. And I think this was a blip but I think it's that big push that we've seen in history repeating itself over and over.
Yeah. And I mean, we could point to times in history in the 60s when division was great, in the time of Wesley where divisions are great, and South African apartheid when divisions were great, and how God used the church in those moments in society to bring people together that society was working hard to keep apart. And how through those relationships with God and with one another that we saw transformation of individual lives as well as societal transformations. And I see God doing that again today.
So what do you think about the hope of tomorrow in the church? Like, church doesn't look the same, and we sit and we talk about that, Joy, and I've had that conversation. We had that conversation as a team. It's not the same as what we did, in evangelism, even in worship and programming and buildings and how you do things, online, and it's just not the same.
No. Yeah. I think people look at the church differently, and they, I was going to say they expect different things from us, but I'm not even sure they expect anything sometimes from us.
I think that's
so there's this point that we're crossing, this kind of tipping point, if you will, or inflection point of, will we be relevant again to anybody, or will we just fade away? And I think the church has to ask that question every generation, but it feels especially poignant right now as to, will we be seen as a place where you can expect hope, or where it just takes it away and go on about your life?
Absolutely.
I grew up in a small town, rural East Texas, and I can remember as a small child there was this thing called blue laws where the stores couldn't be open and the stores that were couldn't be sold on Sunday. And I grew up in the country, and we had 4 TV channels, and even if we wanted to skip church and stay home and watch TV, the only thing on TV was church. And so it's just, you just kind of went to church. But now, as Joy was sharing, we're not even on the radar for a lot of people.
No.
And so our season of just, waiting for people to come to church, or hey, can we just do the next program that will attract people?
Right.
Those days are not here. People aren't waking up wondering which church they're going to go to. They're not moving to a community and, first thing on their checklist, find a grocery store and find a church. Mm-hmm. And so as a church, instead of the funnel, how do we get people into church? The question now is, how do we get church into people? Mm. How do we get our church reaching out to those? All the studies say that loneliness is growing. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, the church has the cure for loneliness, which is love, the love of God and the love of God's people. Mm. But we can't wait for them to come to us anymore. Mm. We have to get really creative, and that's just not, and that is technology, but it's also how are we going to gather in new ways in church buildings and outside church buildings in a way that really speaks to people's hurts and their loneliness and the desires that God's put within their heart.
Mm. I wanted you to share with us a little bit about hope for you. What does that mean personally for you in ministry, and how was the first time you saw hope in your life?
So, I'm trying to think back when the first time I found hope. I guess I don't know the answer to that question, but I do want to share. When I left seminary, one of our professors on the last day of class, he said to us, he goes, "I send you forth to be peddlers of hope."
Love that.
And I thought about, the door-to-door salesman, and to think, okay,
with a vacuum cleaner,
what is our product? We are being forth to peddle hope, to share hope, and I find hope in so many places. You talk about how exciting. Well, it's an exciting season in the life of a church. It's not a season where we just can just rest on our laurels and just do the same thing we've always done or the same thing week after week. Mm-hmm. We've been challenged in new ways, but as I travel and visit churches, I see the church stepping up in new ways and responding in new ways, and new people coming into the life of the church. So I run the numbers, and people are like, "Oh, the conference only cares about numbers." I said, "Well, the numbers represent souls, represent lives." Yeah. And our worship attendance throughout the conference was up this past year, which people say the church is dying. I go, "Well, that's not what the numbers say." Mm-hmm. People are coming back, and I'm hearing more and more. We know a lot of them are people coming back after the pandemic. But we're also seeing people who have not found a church home or even thought much about the church.
Wow. And
the church is either reaching in a new way or connecting with them in a new way, and they're finding their way into the lives of congregations. Yeah. And that brings me hope and gives me excitement in the work of the church.
Share that story you did with Joy and I a minute ago. I love that story about Stan.
Okay. Well,
that was a good one.
I worked here at Lovers Lane, and I came here in 1998. And I came straight from the Peace Corps in Ecuador. And in October of 99, a hurricane came through Central America, Hurricane Mitch. And it just, you could see the satellite pictures. It covered the entire country. It's not like, when hurricanes hit certain areas of our nation, the other areas of the nation rally to help it. This was, just devastated the entire country. And I remember seeing these pictures of like families on the rooftops of buildings without captions of what happened to them. And I couldn't help but see the faces of the people I fell in love with in Ecuador.
Sure.
And so I went to Pastor Stan and I said, "Pastor, we need to do something. Lovers Lane needs to do something." And Stan turns to me and he says, "Well, do something." And I was like,
very typical.
Okay. Okay. And so I started looking for ways to do something. And of course, if you seek ways, God provides ways. And this congregation got behind it and for years sent teams down to Honduras to minister. And so where do I find hope? I find hope that we belong to a church that when God puts something on your heart to do, God will connect and provide ways through God's people to enable you to live out those plans and purposes that God has for each and every one of us. And we have a church body that connects with us, that enables us to do far more than we would be able to do by ourselves.
Yeah. It makes me think of what you said earlier, it being hope peddlers, and then you said earlier being more incarnational, going out like Jesus came to us being the church that then goes out.
I love that.
Almost like hope that's seeking out people is what the church needs to be saying yes to, is where do we go out in the world and bring the hope that we have instead of expecting them to come and find hope, going and bringing it to them. And pastors and church leaders like yourself who will say, yeah, let's do it. You know, what can we do? I love that.
And do it differently. What I love about what I have seen you do is that there's more than one way to do that.
Indeed.
So if you could share something with somebody today and bring them some hope, just from your perspective, how many years of ministry have you been in now, Owen?
So it was 25 years ago this summer that I first stepped into the pulpit of Lovers Lane United Methodist Church to preach as a seminary student in my first year. But Tom Husbeth, the pastor of the deaf ministry here at Lovers Lane, he reminded me that when I was president of the youth ministry in Henderson, and he was our youth pastor, that we did an exchange program with an African American congregation. Okay. To seek to heal. And so to ask about, how long have I been in ministry?
That's a long time.
Well, ministry did not start when I became ordained.
No.
And so I want everyone out there listening.
Yep.
You are in ministry today. God has plans and purposes for you, and your hurts that you have, the tough experiences that you've had, the struggles that you have had, as well as those gifts that may be hidden inside you. God has plans and purposes for that, and God wants to use you because there are people out there who need what you have and that you uniquely have. And so I want to share with you the good news I have for you is that God loves you, and God is going to provide for you to be able to use what God has given you and that what you have been through to bless others.
So good. Yeah.
Wow.
I'm inspired.
I am too. And
thank you.
I agree, Joy, and I'm thankful because you're such a visionary outside of the box, and I appreciate you sharing your words of hope with us. Any thoughts, Joy? Anything you're thinking about?
Yeah, every time you share, I just hear this movement of hope finding us.
Yeah.
And even when we're not looking for it, and what an assurance that we can take away, that if we just give a little bit, God will use it and do so much more than we could ever think or imagine. And so thank you for sharing.
And thank you for bringing that hope to us and all of those out there. And thank you for what you continue to do for the church, Owen. It's appreciated. We're glad you joined us today. And please know that you are loved and that you really, really do matter. And if you're out there and you're trying to figure that out, we hope that you find it right here on the Hope Connection in any way that we can help you. You can find us at llumc.org or any of the platforms that podcasts are on, but look for us. We love you and we appreciate you, and we'll see you next time.